So, welcome back, folks, to the channel. And a good one today in regards to a game we've been recently playing on live stream, Volgarr The Viking. And some funny things came about, I suppose, from playing that game, and some of the folks in the community who kind of picked up on it in my YouTube community itself, have picked up on that game and are starting to play it themselves. And lo and behold, a couple of tweets later, a couple of videos later, here we are actually talking to the developer of Volgarr The Viking. So I'd like to welcome everybody. Say hey to Kris. Maybe Kris, if you want to introduce yourself briefly to my audience here.
Hi there. Yes, I'm Christopher Dürrschmidt. I'm the CEO and creative director of Crazy Viking Studios, and we made Volgarr The Viking. And another game coming out here pretty soon that we haven't officially announced.
Brilliant. Well, I might chance my arm asking some questions, but I don't know whether you can answer them later on that. But we'll
give it a shot. We'll give
it a shot. Cool. Maybe just to try and give folks a little bit more elaboration on the kind of introduction to this game, to my channel first and foremost, and what we're going to get into today as well. Two parts for the community, and the fact is, whenever I stream games, people want me to stream games that make me rage and rage hard. And we've played games. I've played some pretty challenging games and beat them on the channel over the last couple of years. Castlevania Rondo of Blood, the Cuphead series, the Crash Bandicoot series, Donkey Kong series. What I would class as challenging games to me. I don't know how you feel about that, Kris, but those are kind of some of the types of games that people want to see me play, because my streams can include a lot of F-bombs, and I think that's what people are trying to squeeze out of me. So this one came up and was recommended a couple of times to me by a good friend of mine in the community called Game Culture. And I had promised him, I said, right, finally, we're gonna get into this. I knew nothing about your game. I knew nothing about it. But he had told me that it's an absolute classic, but he said, you will rage, and you will rage hard. And I said, no, this can't be as hard as anything I've played before. This is my own kind of thought process. But boy, was I wrong on that first stream. I managed to get to the second level, and I think I'm nearly about to move to the third level. So we're actually streaming the game again this Friday. But that's just maybe to give some context as to how this all came about. And as I said, it was great to actually reach out to you on Twitter. So I appreciate you getting back to me, Kris, and actually giving me the opportunity to actually talk to you today. So that's kind of some of the context behind it all. Maybe some questions for yourself now, because I think folks want me to stop talking, but I did kind of want to fill that in first. Tell viewers about yourself, I suppose. That's the first thing I want to do, as viewers will want to know about yourself, just in general, and what inspired you to become a game developer.
Sure. That's a really long story, because I've been making games for a very long time. But when I was a child, I actually really didn't think about how video games were made, even though I loved them. I've been, when I was like 6 or 7, my parents got us the Atari, and it was kind of all over at that point, just about playing video games and stuff. But never crossed my mind that was like a serious possibility for something that you could do for a living.
For a job,
I always grew up thinking that I was going to be a comic book artist, or a graphic novelist, or something of that nature. And again, all my friends and family are like, don't do that. There's no money in that. You'll never make a living. And I got accepted to a place called the Joe Kubert School of Art and Design. And right before I went to that, it was a very prestigious art school where comic book artists go for Marvel and everything else. But 2 weeks before I were to go, my little brother got very sick and wiped out any chance I had of going to that college. We needed to use that money to, keep him alive.
Oh no. Okay.
And so I was like, okay, well, what do I do now? So I joined the Army, because the Army, U.S. Army anyway, if you do military time, they they provide you with college money.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, well, I'll go that route. And things, you kind of grow up in that little time period, and as I got out of the military, I was kind of like, well, do I even want to do this anymore, or go do all that stuff? And just trying to find myself. I did odds and ends jobs and things, and I applied to a job this is how old I am. Back in these days, you applied to jobs that used to have ads in newspapers.
Okay.
It's made out of, for your audience, and if they don't know what this is, it's a document that's made out of actual paper that you have to touch.
Right.
And right. So in a newspaper,
news to me as well. I want to learn it.
Yeah. So in the newspaper, they have at the back of newspapers, they used to have these job listings for local jobs and stuff like that. And I was looking for work, and I found a job listing for a police sketch artist. Oops, excuse me. Sorry about that. Bubble water.
You're okay.
So I applied for just a little belchy. Sorry about that. So I applied to the police sketch artist job, and what that is like, when like crimes happen or whatever, you go, you talk to the police, and the witnesses describe this person, and you try to sketch them and whatever. This is back before there were cameras everywhere too, catching everybody all the time. But,
yeah.
So I applied for that job, and it turned out it was a misprint in a newspaper. It was actually a job listing for a video game studio that's looking to hire a background artist.
But it sounds like even just what you're filling in there right now, it sounds like creativity was on the top of your mind all the time, really? Like just
I always wanted to be for sure. I always wanted to be an artist. I mean, that's kind of like where my spirit animal is the most happy, I guess. Just drawing things and trying to create things. Either it was in animation, or that's the other thing too. Like I was big into doing animation and stuff like that.
So so that's just maybe to kind of divulge there a little bit, because I was trying to do some research, obviously, before the podcast, and trying to get a little bit of knowledge into your background. You had actually worked for a company called Kryptonite Games, if that's correct. And you have had direct dealings with the likes of, I assume, this is my assumption now, you have had some direct dealings with Microsoft, Nintendo, Sony, etc. to an extent. Would that be correct statement, or?
Oh yeah. It started with that, and that's who ended up hiring me. That's who the job print was actually for.
Okay.
It was for that company, and that's who I interviewed with and got my first game job. And I was there for a little over a decade. And of course, we worked with Nintendo. We shipped games on Nintendo platforms, on Microsoft platforms, Sony platforms, and we're talking about 3DS, GBA, DS.
Oh, great. Okay.
GameCube, Wii, Xbox, PlayStation, Vita, PSP at the time.
So what would be maybe your 2 or 3 notable games under that company that you're probably most proud of? Maybe that's a question to put to you.
Most proud of? Man, I worked on so many games there. Let's see. Shinobi.
Yeah, everybody loves Shinobi. Okay.
Okay, Legend of Spyro: The Eternal Night for the GBA.
Okay. Yeah.
Man, I worked on a lot of stuff.
I wanted to get the Shinobi title. That was for the 3DS. Sorry, just to double check.
Yes, that was for the 3DS. That's the last Shinobi game.
I'm on the hunt for that, so I hope to cover that in the future sometime as well. But yeah, very cool. Very cool. So yeah, okay. So you worked there for a decade then, and then was that then when you decided to maybe move into a solo role or solo projects, or was there a particular reason why you left, or?
Yeah, actually, the right after finishing Shinobi, the company was purchased by another company called Glu Mobile, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with them, but they're a pretty big mobile game developer. They're really big into doing like
mobile games. I'm not a big fan, but
yeah, I mean, I'm not either, and that's why I like to make things that use buttons and have traditional gaming experiences and stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with mobile games or people that play them. I think that's fine. My wife loves them a lot. And it's just not for me. So, I didn't want to go from doing games like Shinobi and Assassin's Creed and Marvel titles and fun things like that, to me that were fun.
Yeah.
To doing Candy Crush. Like I had no interest in that. So we left to form our own indie studio at that point, because we wanted to continue to make games that we found fascinating and interesting. And
that at the time was when indie studios were kind of just about coming up at that stage. Was it 2012, 2013 or something? Maybe I'm
Yeah, absolutely. We were right on the cutting edge of that. So at the time it was like us. It was Jonathan Blow, Braid. It was Super Meat Boy.
Oh wow, okay.
So right around that time period.
Yeah. That's exactly kind of, that was my kind of first kind of latch onto. Oh wow, these indie titles are really great. Whereas maybe before that time, maybe I was suckered into always playing, what was common and what was coming out. Whereas I started to kind of branch out and say, well, actually, do you know what? There's small developers making really cool games that are probably better than a lot of the stuff that people are paying 60, 70 euros for, or dollars in your case. But so it sounds like, I maybe just a question on that development path then. Is there what's the pros and cons maybe between the creative freedom that you possibly have with your own projects versus maybe dealing with a company and that kind of thing?
Sure. When you deal with things like, let's try to do a direct comparison here. So you have a couple different things that we did at Grip the Night. Sometimes they were things that were movie tie-ins or licensed IP. You don't see a lot of games like that anymore. But when you work on something, let's say we did a Thor movie game or something. So what you would be juggling if you're working on something like that is you're constantly having to work with Marvel. Marvel would have a say in what you were doing.
Yeah.
And if Activision was the one that had the license to the Marvel game, you're not only dealing with Marvel, but you're also dealing with executives at Activision who had a say in it.
Okay.
And then, of course, you had to always appease the actors of the movie, of the thing that were in it. So, you'd get somebody like, I'm not throwing Chris Hemsworth under the bus or anything. I've never met him or talked to him or anything. But we would work with actors who would come back and go, yeah, that doesn't look like me. And we're like, well, yeah, no kidding. You're only 8 pixels tall. Like, it doesn't look like anybody. Like, of course, you're not recognizable in this sprite because it's super tiny. Like, well, can you make it look like me? You're like, no, we can't, because there's just not enough pixels to do that. Like, we can make people understand that this is Thor, but it's not going to look like Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah.
So that's why you would see a lot of things like sometimes with portraits, like you'd have these, when they talk, you'd draw these bigger portraits where you could show where the actors were and stuff like that. But then when you did stuff like that, then you'd have that 3-way, super ultra picky, time consuming back and forth of, I wanted his hair to be more blonde, or change this hairstyle, or make the angle different. Like, so you dealt with a lot of that. Because
that's really interesting, because I guarantee a lot of the audience won't know that at all. I didn't know any of that, really, to be honest with you. So it's really interesting even to know how much you're playing a bit of politics in a way. It sounds like you have to deal with like 6 or 7 different people and trying to appease all of them by the sounds of that.
Oh yeah, and sometimes you get stuck in the middle and they would argue with each other, and like you would have Activision arguing with Marvel, and you're stuck in the middle waiting for somebody to resolve the conflict or something.
Yeah.
And again, I want to make it very clear, this is a hypothetical. I'm sure it's happened at some point where Activision and Marvel got into it or something, but I'm not saying that that's happened.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Yeah.
They're all great companies to work with, but no matter who you work with, there's always that kind of conflict. And with Shinobi, it's a little bit different because it was an original IP that's actually a game IP that's owned by Sega.
Yeah.
But in that situation, we were dealing with 3 different branches of Sega who are separate entities. So we had Sega of Europe we had to deal with, Sega of Japan, and Sega of America, who all had their own inputs and control over the various things that were going on. So we would get into things where, Sega would have their own internal arguments and fights and power struggles in order to, get things accomplished in the game. And literally one time I'll tell you this one funny story. Literally one time with Warner Brothers, one segment of Warner Brothers sued another segment of Warner Brothers.
and they're both Warner Brothers.
And they're both Warner Brothers in their own company. We're just like, what the heck is going on here?
Okay,
but,
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, that's actually really interesting stuff. But maybe just to kind of circle back a little bit, I want to start talking about Volgarr directly now as well, and maybe just before that, a primer to that, let's say. It sounds already that you've always been a gamer at heart, and that natural creativity is obviously fed into the game development role that you're kind of been playing in a pun on words there for your working career so far. Platformers, are they your favorite genre, or is there a specific genre that has driven you to create something along the lines of Volgarr? Or is that an assumption I'm just making?
I don't have I wouldn't say that platformers are my favorite. I do have, a favorite kind of time period, I guess. Like,
Okay.
Like arcade games from, I would say, like the mid 80s to about 1996 or so, where I don't know if I'm going to start speaking in a foreign language here when I start explaining this, but Capcom had these arcade boards called the CPS-1 system, 2 system, and CPS-3.
I've played them on emulation before, yeah.
Yeah, so right around that time period is about as new. Like when things started switching over to being like, really low poly 3D and stuff like that, I started losing interest.
Okay.
So I'm like a fan of the era of Magic Sword, Rastan, the Dungeons and Dragons brawlers, Golden Axe.
Rasan is the one that everyone kept pointing to me during the stream as like, this is I got an influence on that somewhat. So is that the game is that the game and other games that have influenced maybe some of your design ideas for Volgarr and that period of gaming that you enjoyed the most? Is that what kind of influenced the idea behind it?
Well, yeah, because we were going to make games that we knew. Like, so to explain that is Taryn and I, our expertise was in doing like kinetic gameplay, fighting games, things of that nature, and arcade style designs and games in particular. But when we chose Volgarr, we literally wanted to do something that we knew that we could accomplish as a 2-person team that was, relatively simple, even though the game ended up being gigantic.
Yeah.
That we could do that wasn't going to be super complex. Like we didn't want to run off and try to make, GTA or something like that with 2 people. It just wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
Big Unreal game or something. Yeah, Volgarr is influenced by very particularly Super Ghouls and Ghosts for the movement and the jumping puzzles and stuff like that. Obviously mixed with a bit of Rastan, we have an Easter egg in the opening sequence of the game that is a 1-to-1 tile up until the first waterfall.
Yeah,
and you actually see Rastan slumped dead in the cave down there.
Okay, we'll have to circle back on that on Friday to see that. So that may have been something I had missed, even though I had played that level probably 100 times on the stream.
Yeah, that skeleton by the first chest, the first underground chest by the bees, where you break the rock.
Very cool.
Skeleton, yeah, that's Rastan.
Okay, so I'm going to look at that on Friday, and we're going to point that out to folks. So that's cool. So like the other thing is as well, the challenge level. I suppose for me, I've always enjoyed playing challenging games. They tend to piss me off, but it's the nature in my own brain to say overcome the challenge, and then once you do that, there's no better feeling I don't feel in the gaming experience. And I definitely got that even from playing the first level and playing a strong segment of the second level. Was it that idea as well to make sure that it was, I suppose as well, it sounds like at a time period, and I'm trying to think back myself in my own head in and around 2012, 2013, 2011. There was a lot of games that held people's hands a lot and maybe too much. And there was a small crave for challenge without maybe I wouldn't say the Dark Souls-esque rise, but it was more so just maybe simplistic is not the word, but clever and straight in its design, and at the same time having a challenging but fair. And that's what I actually felt when I was playing Volgarr the Viking, is that it was always actually technically my fault, even though I was screaming in rage at certain points. But that to me was the best part of it. Was that the idea overall, to try and go after that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you hit it right on the head there. That was the entirety of the goal of the game, was to invoke that feeling, because we felt like around that time period, even when we were making Shinobi, we were getting really sick into the stomach of the direction that games were going. Like, we understood that gaming in general needed to broaden the market, bring more people in, bring more money in. And it makes sense to make games for a wide audience, as big as you can, to get as many people to buy your game as possible. But what we also recognized with Volgarr was not every game needs to do that. Like, and gaming is so big that we actually told people when we were going to make Volgarr what it was. They were saying we were insane. It would never sell or make money.
Yeah.
Jokes on them. But
yeah,
but
it is
the
on
thing
them.
is that there's room for, how do I describe this? For us to think that nobody out there would like to play a game like Volgarr would be kind of weird, because we wanted to make a game that we would want to play, that we felt was lacking in the market at the time. It's like, well, I want to play this game, but I can't find it on Steam. I can't find it anywhere. This is not a game that people are providing. I mean, I can go back and put Super Ghouls and Ghosts in my Super Nintendo and play it. I can go back and, plug in my arcade board for Rasan and play that again. But those games were 20 years old at the time. I was like, we wanted a new game we wanted to be able to play a new game that gave us a new experience that were like those games.
And I'm finding, and I'm just sorry not to cut across it, but I'm finding now that over the last decade or so, there's been this incredible rise in the want for that return of challenge and reward. And I've kind of changed my gaming scope and choice and selection somewhat again, even though maybe primarily when I was younger, I was definitely SNES, PC, early PC. But it sounds like that hunger, started to come up at that point. And it's nearly, people respect the fact that a developer now has integrity and they want to make the games that they want to make, rather than dictate and have everything to cater for all, if that is kind of what I'm getting at. And that's another feeling I got.
So our philosophy is that we are not unique snowflakes. We were like, if you think about, hold on, I'm going to try to rephrase my thinking here. I'm trying to say this without cussing too much, or
you can cuss if you want.
I didn't know exactly what the audience is going to be. I was like,
believe me, I do it. I do it on my streams all the time, but not typically in recorded footage, but it's okay. It doesn't matter.
It'd be really funny if you bleep me out all the time anyway. But so we realized that we weren't unique snowflakes. We wanted to make games that we wanted to play, and we assumed that because we wanted to play these games, there has to be somebody out there else that wants to play them, because we like Rasan and we like Super Ghouls and Ghosts, and those games sold well. So we're like, let's just make what we like and what we want and hope everybody else goes along for the ride. And thankfully they did. And one of the goals, to circle back on the question that you had, was we really, really wanted to we didn't set out to make Volgarr hard for the sake of making it hard. We set out to make Volgarr like those other games, but we wanted them to be fair, and we wanted to emulate the feeling of that. How do I explain this? That feeling of nostalgia, to where, like, if you walked into a room and you smelled something, or you ate some food, or your grandma's house, there's like something that all of a sudden you get this massive wave of nostalgia, and you can't quite put your finger on it, where it makes you feel like a child again. And that was what we were going for. We wanted people to invoke incredibly good feelings, to have a game that was like that wasn't being serviced anywhere else. Now, I will say that in that time period, we were one of the more early ones to do this kind of stuff. But now there is a thing where games are hard for the sake of being hard. They're not quite fair. They're just like brutal, and you just bang your head on the wall.
Cheap is
accidentally are successful at it, or whatever.
Yeah, cheap is the word I'd use. Yeah,
right. But you're not actually getting
better.
better.
Yeah,
So that's the thing we wanted Volgarr to do. It was like we were trying to make a video game that was like taking you to driver's ed school. Like we were going to tell you how to be better at actually playing video games, not just get better at this game, but make you a better player at all games. Like that's what we were trying to do. And one of the things that we laughed about was in this time period, almost every console game, and sorry Ubisoft, I'm throwing you under the bus here, but they're one of the ones that were you would play the game and it would be an hour-long tutorial on jumping before, and then you go on to the next thing. Before you're playing a game for like 5 hours before you get out of the freaking tutorial. And that drove us nuts. So that's one of the reasons why you'll notice in Volgarr the Viking, the whole tutorial, everything you need to know about playing that game is in the first room. You cannot leave the first room without having accomplished everything you need to know in order to beat the game.
Yeah, and I experienced that for the first hand last week. So, but to me that was great because I was like, right, I've picked up the core fundamentals. Now suck it up and figure it out. That's kind of what I was feeling in my head as I was playing it.
There's some expert moves and combinations, and there's things that you learn along the way that make that you can use those things in certain situations that make you a pro. I mean, people beat Volgarr the Viking now in like 15 minutes, from front.
I have that one saved because that was pointed out to me by Game Culture. He had mentioned that somebody has beaten it in 15 minutes, and I was like, no, there's no fucking way that was beaten in 15 minutes. But yes, it has been. So, but I'm not going to do that till I beat the game because I will beat the game. I'm confident of that. But
we just don't want to treat players like they were dumb. Like that's the biggest driver. Even games today, a lot of the times you load it up and it's like, wow, you don't even let me skip this. It's like you want to teach me how. It's not like they're teaching me how to read or understand the concepts of what the game is that they're selling, but they're also trying to teach me like how to count to 10, what the alphabet is. Like it's like, wow, we don't have to go that hard on the tutorial, guys. Like, give me what I need to know. Let me start playing the game.
And have more faith.
I understand why they do it.
Yeah.
All right, I understand why they do it. These big companies, you got shareholders and all this other stuff. You need to try to get as many people to buy your game as possible, but they don't give you an option to skip it or whatever, and that drives me nuts.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's how we got to the way that Volgarr is, and all of our games that are coming out in the future, and pretty much anything that I work on, will always do that. Like we will always look for a way to use as few buttons as possible to make the game as simple as possible. Like easy to learn, but difficult to master.
Difficult to master, yeah.
Right.
And it was that learning pattern that I'm just trying to speak of my own personal experience of playing it. It was that slow learning pattern, and eventually was like, oh, that's how I get that bit done. And I was like, even naturally, as I moved through the level and started getting towards the boss, it was like the other bits before it were then becoming not trivial, but as long as I done what I did before and what I learned, I could focus on the next part. And I kind of, in my own head, I was treating the challenge. That's how I was treating it until I actually beat the boss. So, and that design I love. It's similar, invoked similar feelings for me that Cuphead and its DLC did in that regard. Although I would find Cuphead can be at times sporadic in its, let's say, attack patterns, but majority of the time maybe I'm trying to compare it because it invoked the same feeling I got when I'm playing Volgarr, if that makes sense.
Well, sure. I mean, they have a lot of similarities, but Cuphead being a run and gun type game, there is going to be a lot of randomness to it because the game is going to be shooting at you and stuff like that, and it doesn't know what your position is. And
that's the random nature of it and the difference. But I think at the end, it was still for me. There's sections that I need to learn, I need to figure out in order to get past either of it, albeit the random nature sometimes to Cuphead, as you mentioned. But yeah, to circle back, it sounds like really it's had a positive impact on, I suppose, other developers trying to move into that kind of realm of fair, challenging games with simple design and as you mentioned, difficult to master, which definitely I've been going after so many of these types of games now because I'm actually having better times with my gaming time with those types of games than I am with, as I mentioned earlier, big AAA titles and stuff like that. So maybe a question to the actual name of the game. Is there a meaning behind that name, or to you, or was it just, let's call it a Viking game and his name is Volgarr, or was there something specific behind that?
Yeah, there is. It's kind of stupid, but we I'm a giant blonde Viking dude, and
Okay.
people used to call me that a lot, and so and I have a kind of a big personality at work, and so someone, I don't remember who said it, to be honest. Maybe it was Taryn, I'm not sure, but somebody said, well, what are you going to call the business? We needed to put our business name down. We're trying to fill out the paperwork, official paperwork and stuff to start the studio.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody wants to come up with some really awesome name for their studio, the cool logo and all this other stuff. And we couldn't figure out anything. It's like we were thinking things like Two Guys Make Games, whatever. We couldn't figure it out. And somebody finally said, well, why don't you just call it Crazy Viking? You're a Crazy Viking. Why don't you just call it Crazy Viking Studios? And we just both laughed and said, okay. But then we're like, well, what should our first game be? It was like, well, you call it Crazy Viking Studios. Your first game can't not be about a Viking. I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
So then we're like, okay, well, we have our theme. We're going to do a Norse fantasy theme. And we're like, well, what are you just going to call the game the Viking? It's like, that's too generic. No one's going to remember that. And so we're just coming up with all kinds of different silly names. And Volgarr was just made up.
But it's memorable though. He sounds like a hero to me. So
right, we were like, oh, that rolls off the tongue, and then of course we did some back and forth. Like, there's some other names and stuff I don't remember now because now it's like 12 years or something like that. But when you make the name, you have to like have and this is we're talking about two separate subjects at once here. But when you go to make the name, you a lot of failings on other smaller indie studios is that they don't think ahead or project into the future how it sounds when you say it, what it looks like when you go to sell it. The logo plays a very big part in catching the eye of people who ordinarily wouldn't buy your game. Like if you're going down the Steam list and you see Volgarr the Viking, it stands out.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But there's thought that went into that and time that went into the placement of the logo, the color of the logo, what it looked like, what it, it's if you look at the alphabet of it, it's VTV, and you put them together, and that's how we ended up with Volgarr the Viking. Is that specific reason?
Yeah.
Some people might find that exciting. Other people might find that
but
boring.
It sounds like it actually has meaning to the extent this your nickname is a Viking.
Yeah, I mean that's how we ended up with all that. The company name and Volgarr the Viking. It's kind of like there's probably some fun stories about how Rock Band became Mega Man in the United States versus the rest of the world.
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So just on the development maybe aspect of it as well, from my research, but hopefully correct me if I'm wrong here, but this was supported with a Kickstarter campaign. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay. So was that? So sorry, just to ask you, was this kind of sounds like Kickstarters were also kind of only really ramping up at that stage. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes. At that time, it's funny that you bring that up, actually. So at that time, we were one of the very first successful game Kickstarters.
Yeah.
To this day, we're one of the more recognizable ones that actually shipped. Kickstarter is pretty notorious now for a lot of people going down there to get games on Kickstarter and then never shipping them or failing miserably.
Yeah.
I will tell you something really funny, though, is that right around the time, now, keep in mind, Volgar's been out for almost 12 years. No, I've been working out for 12 years.
Yeah.
I worked out 12 years ago. It's been out for 10 something.
Yeah.
Anyway, that Kickstarter was within a month of Star Citizen. 10 years does not come out.
Oh, man.
So a bunch of stuff like that on Kickstarter. And
Yeah.
then people are like, well, yeah, we're losing faith in Kickstarter. It's like, well, yeah, because
Well, did that add pressure then to maybe a mental pressure to you guys to say, well, oh God, we got to deliver here. You know that was you coped with that well, obviously, because the game came out. But yeah, it sounds like, because people are putting money up front to something that they want, and
Okay, so I actually do need to explain this, and maybe your audience will appreciate this information.
Okay.
So, Volgarr, because we've been in the industry for a while, we're very aware of how much it costs to make video games.
Okay.
People who buy video games and play them generally don't know the effort and the cost that goes into making actual video games.
Okay.
So when I see things on Kickstarter, and I'll be frank about this, when I see things on Kickstarter, typically if I see a 1-person team or a 2-person team, and they're wanting to make Grand Theft Auto and Unreal or something like that, I'm like, this is never happening. Like,
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then they say they're having a Kickstarter for $50,000. So Volgarr, the only reason we were able to do that is because Taryn and I were very, very experienced and capable of doing several people's jobs very quickly.
Okay.
And what we asked for in Kickstarter was, I think it was like, I don't remember what it was. I think it might have been 40 grand or something like that.
That's small, wouldn't it be, really?
It wasn't really a lot, but the whole point of us using Kickstarter wasn't to get the money that we needed, because Volgarr the Viking cost close to $500,000 to make it when it was all said and done.
Okay. Wow.
So Kickstarter was just 40 grand as a drop in a bucket, and the reason we did Kickstarter was to bring awareness to the game. We used it as a marketing tool.
Okay.
So yes, we did have a successful Kickstarter, but I want your audience to know that a game like Volgarr the Viking could never happen for $40,000. And so anytime you see things like that on Kickstarter, where they're like games that are comparable in size and scope to that, really pay attention to that, because games are extremely expensive to make. And if you're not living in your mom's basement or something where you don't have any responsibilities and stuff, and you know what I'm saying, it's difficult. It's really, really challenging.
No, but and it's good that you clarify that, because unbeknownst to me, and I guarantee you most of the people listening into this podcast wouldn't know that. So it's actually good information in that respect. But no, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the game that we just finished, which hasn't been officially announced or anything, but I will tell you it costs several times more than the original Volgarr the Viking game. It's
okay.
way more expensive, because it's 10 years later. So games of that scope are tremendously expensive. Yeah.
And I imagine cost of everything is just tripled anyway, and we know what's going on everywhere at the moment. But
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So just on that now, I'm gonna poke the bear a little bit here. You're mentioned in new game, and what I would say first would be is I'm already hungry for a sequel to Volgarr the Viking, and a lot of people listening in are hungry for it. Is that ever going to happen? Will be the first question. I don't know whether you can answer that or not, but.
I can tell you that if I have anything to do with it, yes, it will happen eventually.
Okay, good. We'd take that as a positive. That I don't know.
Now, if I go outside and get hit by a meteorite and die, obviously that probably won't happen.
Let's touch wood and hope that doesn't happen. So I assume you can't say that's what you have been working on, or is that can you answer anything in regards to this new game, perhaps, or?
No, not yet, because my hands are kind of tied on that, because I actually worked with a publisher. I worked with a publisher this time around, so because they're handling the marketing and everything of that, I can't really say anything until.
Understood. But yeah, I'll be keeping an eye out on Twitter and everything else. So I've hopefully, whatever that is, I'm hopefully going to try and cover that as quick as I possibly can. So to that point, and maybe just to circle around some quick personal questions. What's your top 3 games and why? Maybe just to get into. Sorry, I'm making an assumption again. Do you still game pastime wise? Yeah,
I try to. I've got 2 little kids.
Yeah, and so do I.
Making video games. Yeah, exactly. So you know how it is. So in between making like video games and stuff, You would think that I'd be sick of it by the end of the day, but I'm not. I mean, making video games and playing video games are two different things.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there that make video games that feel differently. Like maybe they don't want to look at them anymore or whatever, but I love it. So what I'll do is I'll make video games, go play with my kids for a little while, and then once they're in bed, I try to get some gaming in before bedtime to relax and unwind.
Cool. So maybe I'll spread that question out a little bit. What are you currently playing first before I ask you about your actual top 3 games? What are you currently playing at the moment?
I'm currently playing Dragon's Dogma 2. I was tinkering around a little bit with the Ubisoft pirate game.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, what else am I playing right at the moment?
I hear,
of course, Helldivers 2.
Oh yeah, it's such a fun experience. It's something I'm not a big fan of multiplayer games anymore. When I used to be, maybe when I was younger, it definitely invokes that feeling of actually don't mind playing multiplayer games anymore because of it. Dragon's Dogma 2, I hear great things about it. I've not played that myself. So you've got a lot of game in there in front of you anyway to try and squeeze in, because I heard that Dragon's Dogma is a massive game as well. So,
I mean, Dragon's Dogma is a very, very big game. Yeah. I think I played the first one for about 300 or 400 hours, somewhere in there.
Wow.
I don't know, quite a while in it. Yeah. So, other than that, most of the time I play arcade games. Like I have my arcade here at home, and I just play arcade games.
Cool. So it sounds like an arcade game might be in that top 3. So what are your top 3 games? Can you think of that one off the top of your head?
Oh man, my top 3 games of all time. I can't probably do that because I have top 3 games in a whole bunch of different categories.
Well, maybe something that comes fresh to your head. You know, what do you think of when someone says, your favorite games? Maybe that's kind of.
My favorite games, if I were to, bite the nostalgia thing and be like, oh man, I really couldn't live without. If I was stuck on an island and couldn't live with these games, it would be the Dungeons and Dragons games by Capcom. It would be Magic Sword, probably by Capcom.
Mm-hmm.
Rasan, I love a lot.
I'm gonna have to end up covering Rasan on the channel because we kind of. It got brought up a couple of times as well during the stream. So they're like, well, after you beat Volgarr, you're going to have to play Rasan. So I think I'm going to have to do that. I've never played it myself, but yeah.
Oh, it's cool. Time Pilot, which is probably obscure. Oh, Two Tigers, which is really cool. It's this game in the arcade where you actually used a airplane yoke joystick, and this fighter would fly around on the screen and drop bombs and sink ships. I don't know how to describe this. It's a really obscure game, but I think it was called Two Tigers.
Obscure is good. Obscure is good.
But yeah, that's like usually what I think about.
Yeah.
If I'm asked like what my favorite games are, of course, the more traditional route is I'm a huge Zelda fan. I have all the Zelda games. I have tons and tons of Zelda merch and stuff.
Yeah.
Big into that. Dragon's Dogma is really good. I was obsessed with Skyrim for a long time. I've got
I think everyone was obsessed with Skyrim for a while too.
Yeah, I've got 12 copies of that game. It's like every time Bethesda, I was the freaking sucker that every time Bethesda said, "Well, we got this new edition," I was like, "Oh, great! I'll buy it for every system that I have." So every time
everybody has it. Everybody has a million copies of it. It's unreal.
Why do I keep buying that game? Shit!
They know it too. That's why they keep putting it out.
If they did it today, and said we got the
still buy it.
Edition with black horse armor. That's the only new thing. I'd buy it.
Yeah.
$70. Yeah, I'd be that guy.
Yeah. Dropping more full RRP cash on it. Let me see. So maybe the last thing to ask you really is, so we I've prodded at the new games and the potential sequel. I really hope we can, hear more about that very soon. I definitely plan on trying to get in there and digging into information. I hope we can actually talk again real soon whenever you can share more information. If you've not, what I'll do is I'll share in the description as well Kris and his Twitter tag in the description. Go and follow him. As I said, I'll be keeping a close eye on everything Volgarr related and or otherwise. Back to part 2 of the stream this Friday. I gotta practice again. People won't like hearing me that I'm practicing because they were like, no, you need to go in raw. I was like, oh no. So I don't know what I'm going to do there, but yeah, we will motor through it. Hopefully a couple of streams.
One of the things that we didn't anticipate with Volgarr is the amount of people that did want to stream it. Like, we were actually taken aback by that. Like, people to this day still streaming it and stuff. We were very flattered by that. But we also recognize how incredibly challenging that is, because we made the game in a way that we didn't think people were going to try to, talk and entertain people and concentrate on the game at the same time. Like, that's a monumental feat. So kudos to you and everybody else that does streams of the game and actually beats it, because yeah, that's like texting and driving, man, and then getting into constant car wrecks.
I literally had to shut my mouth at the, I don't know, was it the 10th or 15th try to try and beat the boss? I was like, right, no, I'm not reading comments. Stop. Everyone is obviously everyone is laughing at me, trying to get me to say something. So this is it. In effect, everybody's laughing because I'm getting thick. Basically, I'm getting pissed off. But once I shut my mouth and concentrate, I actually ended up beating him. So I was like, right, I don't want to take that approach either, but I probably have to blend that in.
Don't text and drive, kids.
Yeah. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I really, really appreciate you taking some time to chat with me today. I'm really looking forward to getting this podcast edited and tidied up and uploaded. I really hope we get to talk again. Please, whatever, share something. Hopefully we hear something in 2024 about, a potential Volgarr 2. I'm just throwing it out there now. I'm just speculating. Nobody said you said anything. So
yeah, you'll hear something about something this year.
Hopefully. But yeah, thanks very much, Kris. Really, really appreciate it. And for anybody who's new to the channel, make sure you check out Kris's Twitter tag. I'll leave that down in the description, as I mentioned earlier. And as soon as I hear anything else here on the channel, I will be the first person to try and cover it as soon as I can get my hands on anything. We'll continue on with the stream on Friday. Thanks again, and hopefully we get to talk sometime in the future, Kris.
Yes, thanks for having me.
I really, really appreciate it.